All right, everybody, welcome to the webinar. We appreciate your patience. I'm sure there'll be more folks jumping on as we begin, but we are going to go ahead and get started now. We've got a great webinar ahead from HireClix on measuring what matters. My name is Kevin Grossman, president of Talent Award and the Candidate Experience Awards, and we're very happy to bring you this webinar today. And before I turn it over to the speaker and introduce her, a couple of quick things. We are recording this webinar. We'll make it available tomorrow. And again, we're so glad that you're here live with us today. And that is really what I wanted to say. Oh, yeah, if you've got questions, of course, please ask them and submit them through either the Q&A part of the Zoom dashboard or the chat function will work too. Either or will be great, and we appreciate you joining us today. So let me go ahead and introduce our speaker, Kara Yarnott, who is the Vice President of Strategic Consulting Services at HireClix. Kara, you're in very good hands today with the dearth of knowledge and wealth of information she's going to share. Kara, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll come back at the end for questions. Sound good?
Sounds perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Definitely want to thank the Talent Board for inviting HireClix to participate today. We're big believers in the Candidate Experience Awards and are waiting with bated breath for the latest report results to come out as well. So if you aren't already actively participating in Candidate Experience Awards, I encourage you to check it out and participate in this upcoming cycle. We are here to talk about one of my very favorite topics, which are metrics and measuring really what matters. And you'll hear me say that a lot throughout the process. There's a whole bunch of things we can measure in recruiting. There's some that for some reason have always been around and we're always measuring them. I'm not sure that they're the best solutions. So my goal today is for you to think about what you're measuring differently and also have the opportunity to think about how you tell your own story. We are amazing in talent acquisition at filling positions and doing what it takes to get everything done and to get our candidates in and keep our hiring managers happy and promote your brand. We're terrible at telling our own story of success. So some of these metrics can help you do that as well. And we'll talk through that. But I want to start off with a poll that Kevin's going to launch here. I want to understand from everybody that's joining us today what it is that you are currently measuring in your organization. And you can choose as many of these items that are up here if it's something that you're currently measuring. So we're going to give you guys about a minute to tick off the metrics there that you are measuring. So we'll get a sense of where you're all coming from. So there's a pretty long list here. Some you might be measuring, some I'm going to talk about today as ones that I really like to focus on and some that I don't. So let's go ahead and close that poll out. Kevin, let's see what everybody had to say. So there are some really popular ones here. I am not surprised to see source of hire, as 83% of you all use source of hire. Time to do anything, time to fill, hire, or start. We'll spend some time talking about that today. Is another really popular one on the list there. And then some drop off a little bit here. Candidate NPS, we're going to talk about that one today. Sourcing channel yield, offer acceptance rate is another popular one. So you really are all taking a look at a whole host of different types of metrics. Some that may be helping you tell your story and some that may not. So this slide is the list of metrics I wish we could blow up that I find somewhat useless. You see, I call them mostly useless because I'm not in your organizations and everybody's applicant tracking system is different or spreadsheet tracking is different. But let me talk a little bit about these and why I find them problematic. The first one is time to fill or time to hire, which a significant large percentage of you said you are indeed tracking. And it has been one of those metrics that has existed, I think, since the time of recruiting. There's a few problems with this metric. First of all, it doesn't give you any indication of what positions are more important to the organization or which aren't. One of the first things I do with the different consulting engagements my team and I have with different clients is I sit down with recruiters and ask them to walk me through what they do during the day. And they'll log into their ATS and I'll say, how do you know which positions to start with? And for those organizations that really focus on time to fill, time to hire, recruiters, I've seen them sort on their ATS dashboard which jobs have been open the longest. Well, that doesn't necessarily tell us that those positions that have been open the longest are having the biggest impact on the business. And it just gets us scrambling to fill the job as quickly as possible instead of with the best quality hire. So I've got an alternative for that one coming for you. Quality of hire is another one. I get in a lot of arguments in the TA space around this one, but I have a hard time giving recruiters responsibility for the quality of hire. You all do not make the final hiring decision. You don't manage the people. You don't assign them work. Those things are completely and totally out of your control. You all know the data. 60% of people leave the job because they don't get along with their manager. There's not a whole lot to do with you. So I have a hard time assigning this ownership to recruiters. You could have partial ownership of it. I could always dig in a little bit deeper in your specific instance. Offer acceptance rate. I think it was about half of you said you track this. My challenge with offer acceptance rate is recruiters are really good at manipulating numbers. And I know in many instances, if you extend a verbal offer and the candidate tells you they're not taking it, or, hey, I've already accepted another job, or, you're $30,000 off, we're not going to be able to make it work. Often you don't actually issue them an offer letter. So they never show up as being an offer candidate, a candidate that was offered in your data. So often offer acceptance rates are really highly inflated. And then cost per hire. This is always, you're like, what should we calculate in cost per hire? What is the right cost per hire? And it really does depend. I have a problem with cost per hire at an aggregate level because some of your organization hires are going to cost more than others. And you're not always capturing that. We also don't know what to include in cost per hire. So I have some cost metrics that we can look at a little bit differently here. So let's start off with what can you measure? What can you focus on? And I always have this conversation with executives at clients or, coaching recruiters to have this conversation with their hiring managers. You get two of cost, speed, and quality. You can't have fast, high quality, and no cost or low cost hires. You can pick two. So you really look at that and get people to think about what is most important to them. So if you need it to be high quality hires and done quickly, you're going to end up here. Fast and good means it is going to have high costs and you're going to need more budget. If you want it to be done quickly and low cost, here is your option. Low cost and quick means lower quality. You're not going to be able to dig in and find the absolute best possible fit for the role. And in some roles, that is quite all right, where turnover is built into the business model. This may be the right place to go. On the other side, if you want high quality but low cost, this is going to take a while. So understanding what the needs of the business are and helping them hone in on what makes the most sense, you can then start to have some conversations about what metrics we should be using. So how do you help them do that? I'm a big proponent of aligning everything with the business need. That's how we as talent acquisition professionals are able to gain credibility. We are sure we're bringing forward metrics that align with the business. So this 4 box is something I would encourage you to look at. So the bottom, the x-axis here is business stage. Are you super high growth, or is it more of a traditional, more stagnant, not so growing organization or industry? So go along the continuum here. And then what kind of skills are required? Are they highly specialized, not a lot of people in the marketplace with those skills? Or are they more commoditized, don't require a lot of particular training or skills to come into those roles? So thinking about where the needs that you're trying to fill fall on this continuum. So let's just start with high growth. You're in a high growth business, high growth industry with highly specialized skills needed to be successful. So you want to be measuring speed and quality here. Notice we're not measuring cost. Am I saying you don't have to track costs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that's not a metric for identifying the effectiveness of your recruiting efforts. So high speed and high quality. If you're in a growth business, but they're more commoditized skills, things that are a little bit easier to find in the marketplace, then you can measure speed and you're looking at low cost. We look at our businesses or industries that aren't growing as quickly, but still have highly specialized skills. We're looking for quality folks at low cost, meaning it's going to take a while. And then if you're in a more stagnant business with more commoditized approach, you're really just focused on low cost. So this will help you think through what kinds of metrics do you need to be using. And I'll give the big caveat here. Depending on the part of the business you're supporting, this answer could be different. So for two of your business units, it might be here, speed and quality, but another part of the business, it's here. So thinking strategically, talking with your leaders about where the business is, what the skills are that you're looking for, will help you identify what metrics are the most important for you to measure so that you can be effective in your recruiting and tell the whole story. So what I'm going to do is walk through each of those areas, speed, quality, and cost, and talk about some metrics that really will matter to how you align yourself with the business and provide them really valuable information. So we'll start with the speed metrics. And the first one is time to source. So I'm not against time metrics, but I'm for time metrics that really help you identify what's going on in the process. So I've got the definition there. We want to measure the time it takes to identify that selected candidate. So who ultimately filled the role? So you would look at this data after a position has been filled, and you want to look at who was the person. If it was Bob Smith that was hired, we're going to say, okay, what was the date that candidate was sent to the hiring manager? And then we want to subtract the date that the rec was opened or posted. So you're really looking at from the time the job got out there into the marketplace until the person who was hired was sent to the hiring manager. How long did it take you to actually source that person? You may be doing active sourcing to do that. It could have been somebody that applied. It could have been employee referral. But how long did that actually take from the time the job opened till the ultimately hired person was presented to the hiring manager? So this matters tremendously. It's going to capture the effectiveness of your sourcing activities. If you know you've just been waiting for people to apply, and that might be working because of your employer brand in some ways. Your strong employer brand often has a shorter time to source. A less known employer brand might have a longer period of time, but you can start to measure the effectiveness of that sourcing activity. So those of you that focus on sourcing, this is a metric that you should really be tracking for yourselves on all of those jobs as well, but you want to do this across the organization. It can help you identify patterns in what's happening. Certain locations could have longer time to source, certain shifts. Anyone here doing, healthcare recruiting, it's near impossible to hire nurses today, but for odd shifts can also create a problem. So you can start to take a look at your types of roles by what's influencing that source. So this is really the first metric to be thinking about when we're talking about speed, how quickly things are happening. The next one is candidate velocity. This one's been out for a while. I don't know how many people are really touching it, are using it regularly, but this is what we're looking at. We're again focused on that selected candidate. How long did it take them to move through the process? So the previous metric just looked, how long did it take for us to get them in front of the hiring manager? But you want to look at candidate velocity for the person that filled the jobs, or people, if you had multiple openings. How long did it take them to move through the process? So you start with the time they accepted, and you subtract from the date that candidate applied. So the candidate might not have applied till the job was open for 4 weeks. Don't know, that's not relevant in this metric. We're looking at from the time they applied till the time they accepted their offer, what was happening there? How quickly did that individual candidate move through your process? And this is where you can start, when you look at this in aggregate across all of your jobs, where are the bottlenecks in the process? Is it a very likely place for many of us where the hiring managers aren't reviewing those candidates quickly? Is it in getting the offer out the door? Is it scheduling the interview? Where are those pieces that it's happening? So you want to be able to drill down on this, ideally, into time in each step or stage of your process, if you are able to do that, depending on the applicant tracking system you're using. But then you're really focused on the experience of that individual candidate. From the time they applied till the time they accepted their offer, What was their experience? How long did they wait for the next step to happen? So this really adds value because you can start to streamline your process, which will obviously get you hires more quickly as well and improve that candidate experience. And my third speed metric is the percent of your positions that are filled by the date they were needed. So I want you to consider replacing your time to hire or time to fill metric with this one. And let me walk you through it. Probably first started using this almost a decade ago and encourage many of our clients to do this. So the date needed is identified when the job is open. When does this person need to be here doing work? What is that needed date? So a position becomes available. There's a whole host of reasons this could happen. The most common is attrition. Someone has left a job, so we need to fill their job. So what is the date needed? We also can look at, we're launching a new product, or we're starting a new marketing campaign, whatever it might be. Our marketing team is growing. We need to add staff. So what is the date that person is needed? So I don't want people to be worried about opening a job in March that isn't needed till September. And you hire that person in August, your days to fill is going to be astronomical. It doesn't matter because you had the person there in the time that was needed. So this really encourages your hiring managers to give you as much information and heads up about open positions or what they're planning. It allows you to tie things to business need. So instead of what job has been open the longest, because I'm focused on time to fill, I am focused on what job is needed to be filled the soonest for the business. What makes the biggest impact on the business is hiring this position. It could be a job that opened 3 days ago, and that's going to be where you need to be focusing your effort. That may only take you 20 days to fill, but it was so important to the business that it happened there. So it also highlights turnover issues, because in organizations that are using this metric, they see the percent of their positions that are filled by the date needed is very small, because there's a lot of turnover in that organization. In many instances, people give 2 weeks notice. So they resign today, I get the position open tomorrow. Technically now I need them in 9 business days or 13 calendar days. And so you start to see and highlight where in the organization these problems exist. So let me give you an example, because this one is not always super intuitive. So let's just say all on March 1st, you had 3 positions opened. Position 1, the needed by date was 6/1. So we had some notice here. There was something going on in the organization. We knew a project was starting up in June, so we wanted them there by 6/1. That position was filled. The candidate's hire date was May 12th. So that was in advance of June 1st. So yes, it met that needed by date, check mark. Position 2, this is your more traditional turnover position. Someone had resigned. We opened the position on March 1st. Its needed by date was March 15th. The person wasn't actually hired until April 15th. So no, we did not meet that date. So now we can go back and look and say, what went wrong here? Well, we didn't have a lot of time. 2 weeks to get somebody on board is near impossible if those folks are currently working and need to give notice. Position 3 had an open date of March 1st, a needed by date of April 15th, and we just squeaked them in there on April 14th. So that is met the need. So then you just do the simple math, number of positions filled by needed date, 2 out of the total filled jobs is 3. So we have a 67%. So you can start to track percentages. You can start to drill down by location or type of need or level. Higher level jobs might take a little bit longer to fill. And this really gets everybody working towards what positions have the biggest impact on the business. We had a whole month here where this position went unfilled. You can take this a step further. If you are in an organization that calculates revenue by employee, you can say for 4 weeks without this employee, we lost a certain amount of revenue. When you start using words like that, executives start thinking, okay, talent acquisition can have an impact on the revenue. I need to start making sure they're funded appropriately. So this is a great way to look at that. And a metric I strongly encourage you all to think about. It's usually a field you would have to add on your requisition in your applicant tracking system. So, figuring out how you could make that happen would be really, really important. All right, so those were speed metrics. The next ones are cost metrics. So I had mentioned on the slide with the bomb where I wanted to blow up metrics that, cost per hire is a challenge. I want you to look at things a little bit differently. So cost per quality candidate by source. So let me start with quality candidate. If you are not already measuring things by quality candidate in your process, I encourage you to think about this. So if you think about your whole recruiting workflow, where in the process do you consider a candidate a quality or qualified candidate? This could be in a variety of different steps in your process. For many organizations that we work with, it's, those candidates are invited to a hiring manager interview. So the recruiter screened them, they sent them on, the hiring manager looked at their resume and screening notes and said, yep, this is someone I want to interview. For some organizations, it's there. For other organizations where maybe you have an upfront assessment, call centers are popular for this, where how the candidate performs on that assessment would determine if they're quality or not. So your quality definition might be in a different place. And your quality definitions can be in different places for different types of jobs if your organization has some that are more strategic than others. So you have to first identify what step in your process is considered quality. So for today, I'm just going to use the invited to hiring manager interview for the example. So you really want to look at this then by the source. So most of have a lot of candidates that come from Indeed. Maybe your next source is LinkedIn, or you have a source of employee referrals. So you want to be able to look at this cost per quality candidate by individual source. So, you're dividing total cost by the number of quality candidates produced. So you have to be able to pick that out of your applicant tracking system reporting. It gives you a lot of great insight. So it allows you to compare across those different sources of the spend that you have in each one. What is that resulting in? It really allows you to bring forward those sources that bring you quality candidates, because we all know in the recruiting space, there are dozens of reasons why someone might not accept an offer where you pay below market. They don't like the commute. You're not offering enough virtual work. We have a lot of that going on today. Those could be all kinds of reasons. They didn't connect with the hiring manager, whatever that might be. That has nothing to do with the source they came from. It doesn't, whether they were Indeed or an employee referral, if those things aren't available for them or they don't meet their needs, that has nothing to do with their source. So we look at who are those quality people, who's getting us the best pipeline of qualified folks. And it then can also inform your advertising spend decisions. So, where you want to pump more money into those sources that are providing you the most cost-effective quality candidates. And then cost per opening. So this is another one that I want you to encourage thinking about. So cost per opening versus cost per hire. And the difference there is in most organizations, not all, but most organizations, there's some level of noise in the recruiting process, positions that are open but are never filled. And this could happen for a whole host of reasons that this data will start to help you understand what that's about. So I want you to look at, instead of cost per hire, cost per opening. So in the last 6 months, we had this many jobs open. And what was the cost of us supporting all of that? Because what happens if you get down into interviews and for some reason the job gets canceled, you as a recruiter aren't getting credit for a hire. And then your cost per hire is going through the roof because people are canceling jobs. But that's outside of the control of the TA team. We have to understand why that's happening. So it gets you the ability to capture the entire cost of the activity going on in your organization. If any of you are on here, and I recognize some names, so I know a couple of you are in the federal government contracting space, which if you read my bio, I spent a lot of time in federal government contracting when I was in TA. There's a lot of bid and proposal efforts that go on, and that's a lot of activity for recruiters. They're out finding candidates to support proposals that the company doesn't actually win, so you don't actually fill those jobs, but there's no way to capture the activity that happened because nobody got hired. So this allows you to get that picture as well. So think about cost per opening. Obviously, we'll be able to report on how many jobs were open and then apply that total cost of your recruiting efforts against that cost per opening. it will start to highlight parts of the organization that are canceling jobs more often. A few lives ago, when I managed college and diversity recruiting at Boeing, this was a huge problem. And we were in shared services, and so there was a chargeback model. So we identified this and started to charge organizations a pretty hefty fee for canceling jobs after a certain point in the process to make sure that they were bringing forward things that were really real. Because if the job doesn't get filled, we don't traditionally get credit for it. So we need to start capturing those things on the talent acquisition side of the house. So those are your two cost metrics. So now let's talk about quality. So now we're going to go back to that quality candidate metric that I talked about a few minutes ago. So this one is related to the cost metric, but this is really looking at the quality candidate yield by source. So whatever your definition for quality candidate is, so let's just say we're going with people who are invited to that hiring manager interview. If we're using it for the other metric, we want to use it for this metric. And so you want to look at the total number of quality candidates that came from that source and divide that by the total candidates that came from that source. So this allows you to understand the impact that a source is having on your candidate funnel. Because if they're putting a whole bunch of stuff in the top of the funnel, but those folks are not moving forward to a quality stage, that's something you need to consider. It allows you to make better quality decisions. And if you take this metric with the cost per quality candidate, you start to get a really robust view of the sources that you're using and help you understand where you might need to change some things around. So I have an example for this one as well. So let's just look at source A. Let's just say this is your funnel. You got 100 applicants in the top of the funnel. 30 of them were screened by a recruiter. 10 made it through to the hiring manager interview. 6 were offered and 4 were hired. So we are doing the math here that says we've defined quality candidates as hiring manager interview. So I'm going to take the 10 people that got the hiring manager interview, divide it by the total number of applicants from that source. And it tells me my quality candidate yield for source A is 10%. If you were using a different stage in your process, say it was recruiter screen, you would do 30, divide by 100, and this quality candidate yield would be 30%. That's not a good or bad qualification. It's just telling you understand the difference between the two. So let's look at source B. We get a lot more applicants from source B. We get 500. 100 of them make it to recruiter screen, 40 to that HM interview, our key stage. 25 get offered and 16 get hired. So we definitely have more hires from this source. But when we look at the yield, 40 of those candidates made it to hiring manager interview divided by the 500, we've got an 8% candidate yield. So this one yields slightly less than source A. Source C is very different. A smaller number of candidates. We only got 50 in the top of that process. 35 got to recruiter screen, 25 to hiring manager, and so forth. And the quality candidate yield there is 25 divided by 50. So we got 50%. So 50% of our candidates from source C are making it to a quality candidate level, significantly greater than our other two sources. Now, it's obviously fewer hires than source B, and we do care about how many hires we have, obviously. But this is where you start thinking a little bit differently about how you are using your sources. So if there is the opportunity to shift some of your advertising spend or your effort, maybe this is employee referral. Maybe there's a reason to start marketing your employee referral process and program more heavily, or going to a different source that's very focused on the skills that you're after for this job. So you start looking here to say, okay, how many more can we get from here? Is it possible to get 500 applicants from source C? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the source, depends on how well your brand is known by people that are coming through those sources. But this is where you can start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do here? Because you also can think about where is the time spent On source B, as a recruiter, you had to look through 400 other candidates to get these 100 that you screened. That's a lot. Over here, it was just 70. Here it was just 15. So this is helping you to think about, how am I improving the quality? This has an indirect impact on speed as well. You all recruiters know that some sources don't yield as quality of candidates. And so you don't necessarily look at all of those candidates. But if you had this information data, like, you have a good feeling yourself, but let's rely on the data to think about this a little bit differently. And source C may be limited. We might not be able to get a lot more applicants there. So that could cause you to think about it differently. Do I maybe need to try to improve my brand or knowledge awareness of our opportunities with the folks who are typically coming from source A? Give you a lot of ways to think about how you are moving your spend across what you're doing to generate candidates. The next one is on the quality side, is around diversity. So Kevin and I were talking before the session started, and we're having very similar experiences. No matter what employer we're talking to, diversity is coming up as a top topic as well, along with candidate experience. And I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. So really looking at the yield of diverse candidates through your pipeline. So this is another pipeline calculation exercise. Will require you to have data available from your applicant tracking system, and you to be gathering some diverse data from your candidates. And many of you gather EEO data when people apply. And you have the opportunity to understand that percent of diverse candidates that move forward at each stage of your process. And you can start looking at, where do those candidates fall out? You can compare them to what I'm calling the majority. So if we're looking at women, for example, we would compare them to how men are doing in that pipeline. If we're looking at a ethnic minority, we would compare them to the majority group. So you really look at that pipeline yield by stage. So this one, another pipeline for you. So let's just say, we'll use men and women in this example. So let's just say here was your yield by stage for men that were in your pipeline. So of the people that applied, 20% made it to recruiter screen. Of those that the recruiter screened, 50% went on to the hiring manager interview. Of those that the hiring manager interviewed, 40% got offers and 80 accepted their offer and became hires. So that's your kind of baseline when we're talking about men and women. So let's look at the diverse candidates. Let's just say this were women in your pipeline. 10% of those that apply were given a recruiter screen. 50% of the recruiter screens were sent on to hiring manager interview. 30% of those got offers, and 70% accepted and became hires. So there are obviously differences here. And when you put the actual numbers into the pipelines, you can start to see the volume of dropout that's happening. But obviously, 20% of men were getting recruiter screens, but only 10% of women. So this is an area, this tells you where you want to dig in. It doesn't tell you that, oh my gosh, there's a problem. It tells you, here's where we want to dig in. What is potentially happening that is causing women to not be selected at the same rate as men? So start to dig down and look at, are you actively marketing your roles to women so that they understand who you're looking for? Those would be things to look at. In this example, the recruiter screen is yielding about the same. Hiring manager interview to offer, though, 40% of people that are getting to hiring manager interview are being made offers of the men, but only 30% of the women. So this would be another area to drill down into, find out what's going on in that interview process. Are we ensuring that the people interviewing on behalf of your company are trained in interviewing? In many instances, this answer is no. So I would encourage you to think about how you can train your recruiters, your hiring managers and interviewers to be more effective interviewers. And that is often a key issue here. Do you have clear hiring expectations? Are you interviewing, are you doing behavioral interviews based on competencies? That way we are measuring everybody against the same standard as opposed to against each other. Have you done, unconscious bias training with your hiring managers, with your interviewers, with your recruiters? What could possibly be happening here? And you have the same challenge between offer and hire, where there are a smaller percentage of women actually accepting those offers than men in this instance. So that's where we start to look at, okay, did we clearly explain the benefits? Are we offering benefits that are attractive to women? Why are they not accepting? Are they not seeing people like themselves in leadership? Or you need to make sure you're marketing that story and telling your story about successful women in the organization? What is missing here? Potentially you could drill down with some surveys or interviews with people that have turned down the offer, but something is amiss. So I'm not saying that there's a specific problem. I wouldn't know what the specific problem was, but this tells me where to start looking and where to start digging in on the difference of the experiences of the diverse folks versus the majority people. My team at HireClix, we did this analysis recently for a client, not something they had ever looked at. And they were somewhat shocked to see the differences in how different groups were treated inside different areas. In technology, there were challenges. In sales, they were different challenges. So starting to then roll up our sleeves and figure out what is going on that is causing these yields to be so different. Was really eye-opening for them and really changed the direction. They have, like many of you, a very concerted company-wide effort on DE&I. And so this is important information to understand and really gets to the quality of your process and to your candidate experience. Which is a good segue into candidate experience metrics. So these are metrics I think you should be tracking in your hiring, regardless of what's important, whether it's speed or cost or quality. These are things that, as you all know, you follow the talent board, so you know the importance of the candidate experience. So this one is an important one, your application completion rate. So we want to know, of the people that start applying to jobs on your career site, how many of them actually complete that application. Best practice, you see this in a lot of literature, is that should be 5 minutes or less on any device. I have mobile devices called out here because we're seeing in many industries more than half of your applicants are coming from mobile devices. But you need to be able to track this. If you don't know how to track this, like, call your ATS customer support people and ask them, because it is measurable. So you really want to look at, number of people that started to apply and the number of people that actually finished the process. So the big message here is incomplete applications. Depending on how your process is set up, you likely know nothing about those people. They started, they saw an ad, they liked it, they clicked apply, they started doing something, and then in your process, something derailed them and they never finished. Well, you spent money getting them to your career site, getting them to your ads on any job boards, and now that's lost. So this is a huge metric. I don't see very good ones in many instances. There are lots of industries and organizations out there, depending on the applicant tracking system you're using, there can be as low as just 20% of people who start applying actually finish. If you don't know this for your company, I would encourage you to go find this out, because it's a big impact on your candidate experience. And obviously, if they're not getting through the process or it's too hard on a mobile device, you're asking too many questions, you're doing damage to your brand somewhat without you even knowing it. So this is an important one to track from a candidate experience standpoint. And then the other one I recommend is a candidate net promoter score. I don't know, I didn't see a whole lot of us, but still, I think it was about 30% are capturing candidate NPS data from your candidates. So this is really asking them the marketing question. NPS is born in marketing. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend X company as an employer to a friend or colleague? The as an employer is an important one, statement, qualifier there, especially if you're a consumer brand. But you really want to understand how candidates are perceiving you. So this is your typical net promoter score calculation. the percent of candidates who are promoters, people that select 8, 9, or 10 on that scale, minus the percent who are detractors, which are those who select 0 to 6, and you get a percentage. And you start tracking that. You can then dive in to gather more information. If you do a candidate survey, this is a great question to ask. You could reach out to people to understand, why did you give us a 3? What happened in your process? And then it is a globally used marketing benchmark. So we love to compare ourselves to peer companies in talent acquisition. This is a great metric that will help you do that. So you can see what are a competitor's candidate NPS. It's really valuable. This is something that you can ask pretty easily. Many people ask it on employee surveys as well. So it would be something that could be consistent throughout your organization. So I mentioned this at the beginning, that in talent acquisition, we're terrible at telling our own story. We move from one thing to the next, we get the jobs filled, we solve the next problem. And so you as a talent acquisition person, as a talent acquisition leader, need to be able to tell your story and set the stage internally with metrics that you control. So the first thing you need to do is really look at your company or the part of the company that you are analyzing on that 4-box model I showed earlier. Where are you in a business stage? Are you high growth with highly specialized skills needed? So for my example here, let's just say that's the world that you're in, which I know many of you are likely living in today. So speed and quality. So then you want to have this conversation. Literally take this slide right out of this deck, the one earlier that had this, let's just say, okay, we need quick hiring that are high quality. So let's all just get on the same page. There's going to be a cost associated with this. We cannot do quick, high quality and low cost all at the same time. So setting that stage, bringing forward your knowledge about what they are needing. And then you go through this deck. So speed metrics, here's the things that you can look at. Time to source. This will give you an opportunity to evaluate sourcing function. Maybe you need to spend more money here. Candidate velocity, what's happening in your process? Are we slowing down because there is a speed bump? It takes too long to get offers approved. Hear that in a lot of organizations. And then that positions filled by needed date. What's happening here? Are we not able to move quickly enough? What's driving that? Is it turnover? Is it brand? What else is going on? So you want to start digging down. And then you want to look at those quality metrics that we just talked through. What sources are bringing you the most quality candidates? Let's go invest more there. Maybe you want to do some more branding activities to get with that source to get your employer brand a little better known. And then that diverse candidate yield. Are you spending a lot of effort, your diversity efforts, to attract diverse candidates to your company? And then they are falling out of the process at a different rate than the majority candidates. So these are things that you want to start thinking about, but you have to set the stage, own this, own your data. Here's where we sit as a company. This is what that means. Here's how we're going to measure speed and quality. And then you drive the conversation. So let's just say you're looking at that time to source metric, and the trend you see is that for specific skill sets, it is longer time for you to find the candidate that ultimately gets hired. So options for change. Again, they're going to be specific in your organization, but you might need to revisit requirements. As recruiters, this happens all the time. The list of things the hiring manager says somebody must have is very long. Well, it might be taking us a really long time to find that little purple squirrel. Do we potentially relax some of those requirements? Look at people with adjacent skills that can help. Do you maybe need to spend some more money on sourcing tools? Do you need to go buy one of the sourcing tools in the marketplace? Do you need to spend more money on employee referrals? Offer more referral awards because that's a high yielding source for you? Or do you truly need to invest in branding because you are not known? You're a smaller company, newer company. You might have had some brand challenges in the past. Do you need to get out there so you're attracting more people to you at the beginning of the process? Let's look at percent of positions filled by needed date. So we can say maybe you find in a specific location in your New York office, fewer roles are getting filled by the needed date. The first thing to look at is that potential turnover. Are those needed dates within 2 weeks of when the job was open? Is that because of turnover? Many people track on your jobs if the job is open because of attrition. Do you need to reassign resources, whether those are recruiters or sourcers or advertising spend, whatever that might be? This allows you to take a look at, be smart and strategic, because you're truly measuring what matters here, which is getting those positions filled by needed date. And the last potential example to drive the conversation is that quality candidate yield by source. So again, looking at those sources. So let's say 2 sources are really producing optimal yield, while the third one is really the worst performing. So this is where you can say we're going to reallocate budget over to those sources that are achieving higher quality, getting me a greater percentage of people who meet our needs and hit that quality stage. So those are just some ways as you are owning this, telling your story, and then driving the conversation based on the data that you have brought forward. And that takes me to the end of that piece. I'm definitely open for questions here. I don't know, Kevin, if any have come in.
Well, while we're waiting for that, and again, folks, you can submit questions to Kara either through the Q&A part of the Zoom dashboard or in the chat function. But so Kara, I've got a question. There's so much goodness, metrics goodness that you shared. But like everything, everybody is moving a million miles a minute, right? And they're trying to figure out what can we incrementally focus on now and change in our control when, my recruiters are carrying 30, 40, 50, 60 plus recs, and it's just madness right now. And so where would you, if I'm going to boil this down to where is 1 or 2 business impact areas that I should better focus on now, metrics wise, at everything that you shared, where would you recommend that I kind of begin that journey?
So that's a great question, Kevin, because I know you're all struggling, and carving out an hour today to go to a webinar probably felt like a luxury. So where should you start? What I'm seeing right now, because of the huge challenge we have in the labor market, is a lot of organizations are indeed spending more money, particularly on marketing your jobs or even on brand. So take a look at where the energy has been around your company, because that's going to be helpful. So if your executives have said, oh, here, we're going to increase your budget to advertise, that's when you want to slide in with those quality source metrics. So let's just start tracking this. You're giving me more money. I'm spending more on Indeed and LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter, wherever it is. Start tracking where that quality is coming in, because you'll need some history to be able to show what's going on. So if you've got energy around them giving you more money there, that is great. If the energy is on, oh my gosh, we need to fill things much more quickly, then start sliding some of those time metrics in, the speed metrics a little bit. So I know in many instances they're screaming at you that they want all of it. And so bringing out that chart that shows you get 2 of these 3. So tell me which 2 are the most important.
Right.
Business leaders understand that language, and then grab just a metric or 2. Which one is the easiest for you to track today? If your ATS doesn't give you good data by stage, don't kill yourself doing that one. Go look at the quality metrics. Take a look at your yield. So work with what is easiest first. And when you start to get some momentum, then you'll get support to change some things in order to measure the other things that are important as well.
That's super important. And you also mentioned, which we're big fans of again, measuring your own candidate experience. And you referenced Net Promoter Score. We are seeing more companies who are investing in continuous feedback, not only in candidate experience, but employee experience as well. Yeah. And they are looking at Net Promoter Score scales. Almost any scale that you use, and we use a lot of 4 and 5 point Likert scales, those are easily converted to Net Promoter. In fact, we're doing that now, so there's a comparison for companies to say, okay, now I see where it's at on the plus 100, minus 100 continuum.
Yes. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's important. I think that not everybody's doing that, but I do think that on some levels, because, and you hit it on the head, referrals are the universal, right? I think for most organizations, they should focus, because if they're consumer based, it could impact for purchasing decisions too. But we're mostly talking about, because, percentage of hires from referrals can be 20, 30, 40%. I know it varies companies, but it's important to think about that because in our data, 30% of all the candidates still feel like they are extremely likely to refer, and most of them didn't get hired.
Correct. I mean, that is a completely missed area, is asking candidates for referrals. And, that goes back to if you've got the strong belief in a good candidate experience, even those that you don't hire will want to refer people to you. And we work with a client here in the DC metro area who's done candidate referral, external referral program now for a very long time. And they get referrals from clients and vendors and candidates who were not successful in the process.
Right.
And everyone's putting so much energy into a positive candidate experience. That is a great way to leverage what you've been doing for years into referrals.
Agreed. Companies, the return, it's not a lot of companies think about it or think about rejected pools being referral pools, but it's possible if they feel like it was a fair and positive experience.
100%.
Well, listen, I think, Kara, that might be it. So I want to thank you again very much for presenting today, and everybody, for you all for attending. And again, we'll make sure to send the recording out to everybody tomorrow. And Kara, thank you again very much.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Everyone have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye now.